So y'all seen these videos where these preachers and pastors and such are publicly embarrassing musicians in the middle of a church service and basically just exploiting them to make themselves look good. Well, it's time for this crap to stop, and I think I'm about to go on an angry rant about it. So it's becoming more and more common that these types of situations are happening where, some pastor or preacher wants to, again, make themselves look good. So they say something publicly in the middle of a church service to embarrass the musicians that's playing there. And the more and more that musicians allow this stuff to keep happening, the more and more our jobs get diminished. And that means getting less respect than the little bit we get right now and getting paid less than the crumbs and pennies we make now. So let me address these so-called preachers and crap that do this. And I'm probably going to tick a lot of people off in this video, but it is what it is. So to all of the preachers and such out there that have done this or are thinking about doing this even, your position does not grant you the right or authority to disrespect people in public or disrespect people, period. And stop trying to use these spiritual terms like rebuke and all of that to try to justify doing this. I think all of these titles of bishop and evangelist, prophet, apostle, and all of that have gone to y'all heads. What happened to being humble and kind to people? As musicians, we're sick and tired of you exploiting us in these ways just to boost yourself up in some kind of way. There's these situations that happen where like the choir or the praise team is up singing and then the pastor will literally just get up in the middle of nowhere and say something like,
"Look, whoa now. I want y'all to stop this. See, sometimes I have to say these things, but y'all still, I want somebody to lead this song that's a good singer."
And yes, in front of the entire church congregation while church service is going on, and the church is live streaming. And then when they've done that, they'll turn to the congregation and say something snobbish like, "Yeah, you gotta check these musicians. They think they run things." Like, what? And then there's these little sneaky, underhanded situations that pastors and preachers try to do when they do this a lot, where they'll show up and, they're preaching and they'll want to sing some random song. And then they'll ask the musician if they know it. And if the musician doesn't know it, they'll say something on the mic. "Well, I thought y'all were good musicians. Who hired y'all?" And yes, again, in front of the entire congregation. I'm sorry, but musicians are not magicians. We may not know that random song that you've been singing for years and that you just think everybody should know how to play and know how to play well. The way to properly handle something like this is if you have some sort of issue with the musicians and such, then after church, call them in the office or even call them on the phone, sit down and have a conversation about it and come to an understanding. That's the way that civilized people do stuff. Otherwise, all you're doing is shaming and guilt tripping people in public. You're using this sort of superiority complex that you seem to have, and you're using this condescending language to belittle musicians to lift yourself up in some way. And these things have been studied extensively by psychologists, and the verdict is in. Shaming and guilt tripping and stuff like that are not effective ways to change people's behavior or to come to any sort of understanding. You can study some of Dr. Brene Brown's research on this. Now, you preachers and such that are guests and you're coming to someone else's church as a guest speaker and you're doing this crap at somebody else's church, you just need to sit down somewhere. Again, it's not your church and you don't know the musicians, nor do they know you. So you're being extra disrespectful when you do stuff like this. And while we're on the subject of being respectful, start asking musicians and really everybody for their permission before you start walking up to them and laying hands on them and praying for them and prophesying all of this stuff publicly to them and all of that. They may not be okay with you doing that to them publicly or at all. And you may be one of the false ones anyway. Now, I can already hear all of the people out there that got their draws in a bunch saying stuff like, "I don't see what the big deal is," or "You shouldn't be talking about preachers and such that way, no, touch not thou anointed, and musicians should just have thicker skin," and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what kind of Stockholm syndrome tendencies that you have to think that it's okay for preachers and such to, in effect, abuse musicians in this way, but this is not okay. All of this social media and reality TV stuff have really got y'all minds messed up where you think that it's okay and people should just be okay with being disrespected like that. If your boss at your desk job or your teaching job or where you flip burgers at or whatever it is that you do, walk in and try to front you out and, publicly embarrass you that way in front of the other workers or students or whatever, you lose your mind and be ready to fight. Okay, let me calm down. Now, another one of these areas where these preachers and such like to front musicians out is when musicians leave out of the church service while they're up preaching.
All of you musicians, y'all stay in while I'm teaching. Y'all need the word. Where y'all going? What you doing? I don't like that.
So what'll happen is the musician is done playing and, doing what they're supposed to do. And the preacher gets up to preach. So the musician walks out to use the bathroom or whatever it is they have to do. And then the preacher again publicly in front of everybody says something like, "Where are y'all going? Y'all need to stay in church. That's what's wrong with some of y'all anyway." Now, mind you, half of them don't even be in the church service for stuff like the praise and worship service and everything that happens before they get up to preach. They walk in 5 minutes before it's time for them to preach, and make this grand entrance with, a group of armor bearers and all of these people to look good. But I don't hear nobody talking about that. Let me tell you something. Nobody owes you their attention. And just because a musician doesn't stay and listen to your sermon or they miss some of it because they have to leave out and relieve themselves like every human being on earth has to do, or even for whatever reason, does again not grant you the opportunity or the authority rather to front them out and make them look bad, nor does that make them bad or somehow unworthy of being a church musician. If that's something that you want out of the musicians that play at your church, then get that understanding when you hire them or make it a part of their job responsibilities or whatever, which I think would still be a little silly, but at least you're being upfront about it and you don't have these situations where you're just publicly fronting somebody out in church. Again, you don't know what a lot of these musicians and stuff are dealing with, and you don't know why they may have to leave out. It could be something very serious. But even if it wasn't something serious and they just wanted to leave out and take a quick break from all of the circus antics that y'all be having us doing sometimes in there for 3 or 4 hours for a church service, then that should be okay. And let's not forget that a lot of this stuff is happening while the preachers and such are getting their thousands of dollars in honorariums for preaching a 30-minute sermon, while we, on the other hand, are being worked to death and getting paid pennies. And y'all wonder why church is in an overall decline now, and a lot of musicians don't even want to bother with playing for churches anymore. It's because of these crazy types of antics, and it's because y'all are up there doing the most to try to stay relevant and gain attention. Now, I want to be very clear here and say that what I'm saying here does not in any way suggest that church musicians do everything right or that we're perfect or that we deserve some sort of special treatment or anything like that. There's absolutely room for improvement with church musicians in areas like professionalism and being on time and doing what they say they will do and learning the music and all of this kind of stuff. But any lack of these sort of things does not warrant preachers and such disrespecting and publicly embarrassing them in those ways. But church musicians, y'all really need to stop taking this crap and start standing up for yourself in these types of situations, because that seems like the only way that it's going to stop. So if it comes to this kind of situation with you and some preacher or whatever is up trying to publicly embarrass you in this way, you respectfully hit that power switch on that keyboard or on that organ, respectfully sit that guitar, drumstick, or whatever down, and you get up and walk out. And immediately afterwards, you call the powers that be on the phone and have a long conversation with them. And again, I want to stress doing this very respectfully. You don't want to stoop to the same levels and do the same type of crap they're doing at being, disrespectful and jump stupid and be ready to fight somebody and all of that. You want to be very respectful with this. And you make it very clear that you're not okay with being disrespected and fronted out and embarrassed in this manner. And speaking on church musicians being paid, which is another subject that people even question whether or not we should get paid or not, I've done a video on that subject and you can go here and check that video out right now.